Hello, welcome to Casual Friday. I am GM Jim, and over here is.
I'm Brad from Dire Den.
Hey, and we're co-streaming this, so we'll see how that goes. It's our first time to attempt that. But it's Friday, and with the flood of news related to 5.5 or 2024 or 1D&D or whatever they want to call it, although I'm heavily leaning into 5.5. With the flood of news related to all of that that's come out lately, Brad and I are going to break down some of the classes that have been. They've put out some updates. They revealed some teasers about what's coming in some of these classes. So we're going to talk about that in just a minute. How you doing, Brad?
I'm doing good. I'm a little bleary-eyed. I've been staring at my screen all day working on a one-shot that I'm running at my local game store. So I've been prepping for that all day. Yeah.
Nice.
Got a big event tomorrow at the store. So
yeah, I've got I think 3 tabletop games in the next 4 days. I'm running a Daggerheart session tomorrow for an online group. On Monday, you and me and a couple other people are doing a semi-secret project. That's Monday, right?
I think so, yeah.
I think it is Monday. And then on Tuesday, I've got another Daggerheart session. So I've got a lot of gaming coming up over the weekend. Twin Steel, I agree, 5.5. Brad, where do you stand on the naming convention for the next D&D that's coming out?
5.5 makes the most sense to me.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of people call it things like 5e 2e or 5e revised, which 5e 2e, it doesn't quite flow off the tongue quite as well. I don't feel like it rolls off the tongue as well as 5.5. And there's historical precedent for the 0.5 edition.
Yeah, the only other thing that I would have felt good about if they just called it revised, and then we could have called it 5R.
5R.
But
yeah, that's a worthwhile contender in the discussion. But I feel like there is no 3 to 3.5, and this feels similar. Yeah, with that whole it's that whole it's all brand new, but it's the same. And my
marketing nightmare.
My theory, here's what I think is going to happen. Here's what I think is the next 2 years of Dungeons and Dragons is going to look like. These new books are going to come out, and there's going to be a lot of confusion about people wanting to mix 2014 characters with 2024 characters in campaigns. It's going to be a mess because I don't think they're doing a good job of communicating it smoothly, and I don't think they've got good rules in place for how to mix subclasses, how to do this and all that. So I think what's going to happen is after like 2026, we're going to start seeing things like the 10th year Curse of Strahd Anniversary Edition come out, the 10th year anniversary Tomb of Annihilation, 10th year anniversary Rime of the Frost Maiden come out, where they've updated everything. And then those books are going to say, we recommend only using characters from 2024 because the monster stat blocks are tougher. When did WotC use 1D&D? They called it that during the early phases of the UA, during the early playtests. Yeah. Like playtest 1 through 4 or 5. And then I think they just didn't... What WotC intended was that 1D&D was the name of the UA process, but people were using 1D&D to refer to the rules, and so they did not like how that they didn't want 2024 and D&D to be called 1D&D. Thank you, Twin Steel.
I think
I also agree. Go ahead.
I think it was like the video that came out with playtest 6. Or maybe 7, where they started using like the words like revised and revision and stuff like that. That's why I was hoping they would eventually just call it 5e revised. But yeah, they stopped calling it 1D&D somewhere. I think it was somewhere after like playtest 5.
Yeah. All right, so I've got a couple of announcements right at the top, and then we'll get into our discussion about these classes. Let me end my thing. I'm doing memberships on my channel now. So on my channel down below, there's the subscribe button, but there's also a join button, and you can be a slinger or a super slinger. I know it's an awesome name. For $1 a month, you get these special badges and also custom emoji. But for $2 a month as a super slinger, you get the badges and the emoji, but you also get shout outs in streams, and you also get priority replies to comments, which means if you comment on one of my videos, I will definitely reply to your comment. When I announced this in a post earlier, somebody said, what if do you have to reply even if the commenter is awful or something like that? And I was like, I had to think about it. And I was like, no, I probably just block that person, because I don't really truck with the terrible people. I tend to just block and remove them. Also, in 3 more days, starting on Monday, July 1st, it's Kraken Week. And last Friday, when Brad and I were here, we were unable to really talk about it. We had known about it for a little while, but we were not under an NDA, but we were under a friendly non-disclosure agreement between the other people who were involved in Kraken Week. But now we can talk about it. Next week, across all the YouTubes, is going to be a flood of ocean and seafaring and underwater tabletop themed stuff. Brad, what are you doing for Kraken Week?
I am building an Aboleth cult, so a faction that you can use in your campaign setting. And if all goes according to plan, there will also be stat blocks available. So after one of the videos comes out, I'm going to try to get 2 videos out. One of the videos will show how I built the stat blocks for all the Kraken cultists and their monsters, and then you'll have a link to be able to download those stat blocks to use in your game.
Nice. Are you making a stat block for the one I suggested?
Yes.
I suggested a sort of silly cultist. Kind of half serious, kind of half silly cultist. So you're going to have to go check out the Dire Dens video to see the silly cultist that I suggested for the Aboleth cult.
That one was my wife's favorite. She came in while I was editing the first video today, and she's like, "What are you doing?" And I showed them all, and she's like, "Oh, that's the best one." She loved the HR cultist.
Oh, you spoiled it. Oh, okay. Yeah, I've suggested, every cult needs an HR rep to ensure the health and wellness of the cult members. So that's the 5.53141592 AD&D. Yes, that is a brilliant suggestion. Trying to 1704. All right, let's talk about, unless there's anything else you want to do off the top, Brad, you want ready to talk about these classes?
Well, just to reply as Satis 72's comments, I agree that calling it 2024, is easy for gamers, but for those of us who are talking about it online, constantly saying 2014 and 2024, going back and forth when you're trying to make a video about it, that's not as easy as 5 and 5.5.
See, the thing about content creators is syllables are expensive and our time is valuable. So we can't be saying all those syllables all the time. You need to let our voices rest some of the time there. So one thing I wanted to mention right off the top before we actually talk about the classes here, they've confirmed that, I know in the UA they were kind of going back and forth. They had proposed this in one UA, then they'd retracted it in another UA, but it looks like they are going forth with making all classes, all 5e classes, get subclasses at level 3. So that would include the classes like Wizard, Cleric, and Warlock that were getting them at level 1 before. It's all at level 3 now. And in my opinion, this is probably the thing that most breaks compatibility from 5.5 to 5e. Because, I don't know, I'm really hesitant to take a strong stand on this because I won't really know until I see it play out at the table. But this feels like the most significant change. This is a lot bigger than giving somebody advantage on initiative or letting a weapon do extra damage. You know what I mean?
Right.
What's your take on this?
Well, I think the way they're selling it is like you can build a character using the 2014 rules and play them alongside a character built with the 2024 rules. I don't think they're expecting you to try to pull a 2014 subclass and plug it into a 2024 character, if that makes sense. So like if I want to play a necromancer, since there's not the necromancer subclass in the new edition, I would need to use the old wizard class in order to use the old wizard subclass. So my necromancer would be running the 2014 version. That's my understanding of what they're expecting you to do. But I think you're right. I think people are going to try to take the 2014 subclass abilities and plug them into the 2024 character class.
Yeah, Twin Steel, I completely agree. This feels like a great way to get more people to start at level 3. I've always had a problem with not getting subclasses at level 1 because sometimes the subclass is super important to my character, to my role play. You know, like in a game I played an Echo Knight fighter, which was a really dope. It's the best fighter probably. The Echo Knight fighter was really fun, but my Echo was really an ingrained part of my character. I played this character who had 2 copies of himself, and 1 copy was missing, and so his goal was to try to find the 3rd copy that was missing. And how could I have played that at level 1 without having my Echo? I would have had to have been in a situation where I asked the DM, like, look, I know I'm not technically an Echo Knight fighter yet, but can I have the Echo for levels 1 and 2 and I just won't use him? Or, you know, I don't know how this is going to work with warlocks. Do they not make a pact until level 3?
Warlock, to answer that, the warlock gets they get their Eldritch Invocation starting at level 1. So they they referred to that in one of the videos that's like a mini pact. So you kind of start with your invocations to show that you have been drawing power from this entity. And then when you pick your subclass, that's when the full contract kicks in, I guess. But yeah.
Kind of forces people to get the 2024 version. Let's be honest, who doesn't want to play with a better balanced tuned character in the new options in 2024? Except if that's true, say to 72, except if you're a paladin, maybe. Because paladins definitely got a nerf. And Rangers kind of got nerfed. We'll talk about that a little bit. But maybe we should dive into actually talking about the classes now, because we're kind of spoiling a lot of this stuff before we talking about the subclasses. But it is a worthy discussion to have about subclasses changing to level 3 for all classes now. Yes, subclass is a big part of your story and style of play. It totally can be. It can be. So first, D&D Beyond they put out a lot of videos on the D&D YouTubes this last couple of weeks. And I know everybody's watching them because my channel views have completely tanked over the last week and a half. So I think all of those eyeballs that used to be on my videos are now going right to these 2024 D&D views. But D&D Beyond also published some helpful articles breaking down exactly what is different. And so let's look at the Barbarian. First with Rage. Rage can be maintained by using a bonus action or by forcing an enemy to make a saving throw in addition to attacking or taking damage. And I like this because I like the things they're doing to classes that close those loopholes, because there were still some things in 5e that were sort of like the 4e bag of rats problem. Do you know what I mean when I say the bag of rats, Brad?
Yeah, like you have an ability that works on like dropping something to 0 hit points, and you just carry around a bag of rats, and when you ever need to activate that ability, you just murder a rat.
Yeah,
kind of a thing.
and yeah, with Rage, it was like I don't play barbarians a lot myself, but I've played in campaigns with barbarians who will punch a wall to maintain their rage, and it's always kind of like, yeah, technically that works, but I don't know. It's sort of anytime you've got to actually or say technically it works this way, then I feel like we're kind of stepping outside of the fiction of the game a little bit. Anyway, Rage, you regain 1 expended use after a short rest. I like them giving more short rest stuff, because the disparity between long rest classes and short rest classes sometimes means that you have certain players begging for a short rest after combat, and then certain players who a short rest does them nothing always get annoyed. The cleric or the ranger who the short rest does nothing for them would always be annoyed at the warlock and the monk who want to rest after every combat.
Right. And I think that's been consistent. I haven't taken the time yet to go through all the classes, but that seems to be a constant across all classes now, that you get something for a short rest. So that they've balanced that part out, incentivizing the short rest for everybody.
Yeah. Barbarians get some weapon mastery. You gain access to choose 2 melee weapons. You gain use of their mastery properties. You may change your chosen weapons after each long rest. Gain access to more mastery properties as you level up. I like this for barbarians, because every barbarian I know, especially at higher levels, becomes a weapon collector. They'll always have 2 swords, 3 axes, and a couple of spears. That seems to be pretty common. More incentive to short rest is great. Danger sense changed to no longer need to see or hear effects to gain advantage on dexterity saving throws. Before you only got advantage if you could see what was coming at you, but now it's just fully spider sense, to where you don't need to be able to see it. Feel free to interrupt me at any time, Brad, if you have pressing thoughts on any of these things. The subclasses, the Berserker, Frenzy now deals extra damage instead of giving extra attacks, and no longer provides exhaustion. That was a big one. I never played a Path of the Berserker Barbarian, but I heard a lot of people complaining about exhaustion. Matter of fact, in Casual Friday of last week, Brad and I were talking about how much exhaustion sucks. I think we were doing that. Maybe that was offline, but we definitely talked about that.
The Berserker looks vastly improved from everything I've seen. The Berserker looks much better. I definitely like the Path of the World Tree thematically. So that's a new subclass they added. So overall, I think the Barbarian looks pretty cool to me, and I definitely like the way the Rage is a matter. The other thing I liked about the Rage is that it's up to the player to track. The DM doesn't have to track it. The player does things to extend the rage, instead of the DM needing to track when the rage is going to end. That's
I don't know
my main thing about rage.
I don't know if it says it here, but I'm pretty sure they said that rage is down 10 minutes instead of, I believe it was just 1 minute before. Wasn't it? Wasn't rage 1 minute? Or was it always 10 minutes? Twin Steel, we're just looking at, if you just go to dndbeyond.com, right on the front page, there's a list of all these articles for all the different classes where it says what's different.
And I guess we should say that we went over several of the classes last week. So the ones we're doing this week are the ones we didn't do last week.
Right. Last week we talked about Paladin for sure, and we think Fighter, but we can't remember.
Yeah, I think it was Paladin, Fighter, and I forget. We talked about some classes last week.
We sure did. Sadie 72. It seems like they're keeping exhaustion the same in 2024, which is a bummer because there was one option they suggested in the playtest, which was exhaustion just means one level equals -1 to all D20 tests up to 10 levels, and then you die, which is so much better than what they actually have. All right.
I wonder if that's a matter of like players versus DMs. You know, as far as like the UA feedback, you have a lot of players giving feedback. And so I'm wondering if the players like the idea, oh, well, exhaustion should have something more flavorful and more meaningful, right? So from a player's point of view, I could see a lot of people not wanting to change exhaustion. But like we discussed last week, from a DM's point of view, it's a nightmare to manage. So
yes.
So I think the DMs were much in favor of the new one that they proposed in UA, but the majority of people, you know, giving feedback are going to be players.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think probably a lot of those people who would have voted not to change exhaustion probably don't experience exhaustion a lot in their games. Because if you have a DM who likes to hand it out frequently, you would probably not be a big fan of it. All right, Path of the Wild Heart. Choices are balanced and streamlined, can be changed out each time you rage after a long rest. Path of the World Tree, a whole new barbarian subclass that draws power from multiversal tree Yggdrasil. I'm sure I said that wrong. Don't at me. Path of the Zealot, focus has been shifted to staying alive rather than being easier to resurrect. Now, Brad, I know they discussed each of these in the barbarian video, but I got to be honest with you, I didn't pay a whole lot of attention to that part. I was probably scrolling my phone when they were talking about the barbarian subclasses. Do you have any thoughts here?
Not specifically, other than I think from what I remember when I did my videos about the playtest, they all seemed much better balanced. Where, like, you know, the Berserker was definitely, you know, kind of a mess with 2014. No one played it. And then you had the power creep with some of the Tasha's ones. So I think this is, you know, looks a lot better as far as rebalancing. The Berserker's definitely up there as, I think, one of the better damage dealers out of the four. And I just remember from when I went through all the playtest stuff that I like the balance of the four different subclasses.
Primal Knowledge. At level 3, you gain proficiency in a barbarian skill of your choice. And replace the typical ability score with strength when making certain skill checks when your rage is active. Now, this one I do have an opinion on. I do not like this at all. I don't think you should be able to use strength to pick a lock. I don't think you should be able to use strength to search for a trap. I don't think you should be able to use strength to persuade somebody. Intimidate, sure, I could see that. But persuasion, performance... Maybe performance, actually, now that I think about it. But most checks, I don't think you should be able to use strength. You want to debate me on this, Brad? Or you feel the same way as I do?
I like the idea, because I know what they're doing here is they're trying to give the martial classes stuff to do out of combat. So I like that intention. But I agree it's going to get a little weird with the, like how do you role play this? That's going to be my question at the table, and I know my players are pretty creative role players, so I'm kind of curious to see how funny it gets when they, you know, justify using strength to pick a lock, for example. But yeah, when you said strength for performance, I just thought of those guys that, you know, like rip phone books in half, and you know. They go around to churches doing all these feats of strength to impress
breaking boards for Jesus. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, those guys. That's the one I thought of.
See you, Twin Steel. Yeah, it'll be very curious to see when the barbarian wants to use strength to make a nature check, and they're like, I squeeze the plant really hard to absorb its essence. Like, and see everyone else at the table roll their eyes to see how that actually works. So yeah, this one I'm not so sure about.
Now,
But
you might be able to flavor that as like primal energy, like you're expending some like innate energy with due to your connection to nature or to the world tree or whatever, you're like drawing on this primal power to give you a boost. So not thinking it as much of actual physical strength, but like this, you know, primal energy that you're drawing from. I think that's how I would probably end up flavoring it at the table.
so feral instincts, you can no longer act while surprised, even if you enter rage. Do you think this means because the way surprise has changed? Because now surprise is just advantage or disadvantage on initiative. You think that's what that means? I'm not sure I understand what this text actually is implying here.
See, I've never played a barbarian. I very rarely get to play, so I'm trying to remember what the old feral instincts did. Wonder if I can pull that up.
I think maybe old feral instincts. Somebody in the chat, correct me if this isn't true, but I think you couldn't be surprised if you were raging.
Okay.
As a barbarian,
and they took that away. Okay.
That's what it sounds like.
Okay.
But also, it's not linked here, so they
Yeah,
provide
pulling
no
it up
more
now.
information about it.
Yeah. If you are surprised at the beginning of combat, you aren't incapacitated. You can act normally on your first turn, but only if you enter your rage before doing anything on that turn. So it was a reactive ability to expend a rage to prevent yourself from being surprised, is how it worked. And yeah, so that's definitely a change because they changed the way surprise worked.
Yeah. Instinctive pounce, move up to half your speed as part of the same bonus action you take to enter your rage. So you get a speed boost, which I like. You're raging. You should be able to get a little bit of a hasted kind of feeling. I like that. Yep. Brutal strike. Oh, you have thoughts?
No. I was just agreeing with you.
Brutal strike. Trade off advantage when using reckless attack to inflict more damage and a debuff when you hit. I like this one because something that I say often is that there are a million ways to get advantage in Dungeons and Dragons. So if you don't, a lot of times there's no point to using reckless attack because you already have advantage because of flanking or because an enemy is blinded or etc. So being able to say use your reckless to add damage instead feels very barbarian-y.
That one also replaces brutal critical. So this is a way to let you choose to do more damage when you want to versus waiting for you to roll the critical.
Yeah,
I think that's the other aspect of that ability.
Good point. Relentless Rage, when you drop to 0 HP while your rage is active, you can instead heal for a number of hit points equal to twice your barbarian level. I've noticed this with several classes that they have made it harder for a lot of classes to die in general. There's a couple of the fighter, I believe it was fighter subclasses who got some kind of abilities of things to do when you drop to 0 HP. I think it was definitely the champion. Maybe the champion got advantage on death saves. I don't remember exactly now. There's been so much new information thrown at us the last couple of weeks, but they're definitely making it harder to kill PCs, which I know a lot of people, myself included, believe it was already incredibly impossible to kill PCs in Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, this makes me really want to see the monster manual because I want to see what tools they're giving the DM when it comes to attacking the players with all these abilities.
Yeah, that reminds me, side note, I wish the monster manual was coming out in November instead of the Dungeon Master's Guide. Because the monster manual is way more useful than the Dungeon Master's Guide. Maybe this new DMG is going to be earth-shattering and is going to contain all kinds of amazing advice for new and experienced Dungeon Masters, but I feel like if you've been Dungeon Mastering for a couple of years, you don't really need the DMG anymore, except for like magic items, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, to play devil's advocate though about the monster manual, the one good thing about them doing it last and giving themselves as much time to work on it as possible is because I think that's the part that needs the most work. I think that was the monster manual. I think was the most disappointing part of 5e for me, as far as the monsters aren't overly interesting to play, and as we know, challenge rating is not great, and it's hard to really threaten players. So I think better monsters is vitally important to the fun of the game for DMs, and you have to have a DM to play.
Yeah, like that's speaking of this comment. Will they have molded the CR system, especially, or modded the CR system, especially in counter building? From what I understand, CRs of monsters are not changing. They said they are going to make some monsters, quote, hit harder for their CR level. But I'm really hoping that they come up with a better CR calculator in the DMG, or maybe in the monster manual whenever it comes out, because really I mostly use Sly Flourish's CR calculator.
Same here.
Which it's just like I can't even remember. It's like up to level 5, it's a quarter of the CR per, I can't even remember. I have to look it up when I use it. But it's basically like you add up all the character levels, and then up to, I think it's levels 1 to 5, it should equal to
half.
A quarter, half, and then is it a quarter from levels 5 and up?
It's the other way around. It's total player level divided by 3 for levels 1 through 4, and then it's total player level divided by in half for 5 and up. Is that right?
Okay.
I think.
Yeah, I've been using that ever since I got Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master, and that's worked pretty well. But also there is no real balance is in the eye of the beholder in 5e, so you got to wing it either way. Relentless Rage we talked about. Improve Brutal Strike. Get more options to inflict with your Brutal Strike feature. I don't really know what that is yet. I think Persistent Rage once per long rest. Maybe we don't need to talk about it. We've been going for 30 minutes. Maybe we don't need to talk about the high level stuff because nobody's going to play that anyway.
Yeah. And I think we focus on not only the low level stuff, but like the things that are, thematic changes or, dramatic changes. Yeah.
All right. So let's move on to Rogue, and we'll only go up to like level 11 because that's all anybody plays anyway. The 2014 versus the 2015. I can't make it any bigger. That's as big as it gets. I hope everybody can see that. Weapon mastery. We know what that is. Thieves can't. More languages. Blah. Whatever. Nobody cares about languages. Subclasses. Arcane Trickster upon level can swap out a cantrip. Versatile tricks. That's something that most DMs let you do anyway, right? I mean,
I think that was an optional rule in Tasha's too.
Yeah, I've never had a player come to me and be like, "Hey, look, I don't feel like this spell is working out. Can I change it?" I would never be like, "Nope. Too bad, so sad. That's what you picked. That's what you're gonna keep."
The biggest thing I saw about the Arcane Trickster is they got rid of the spell limitations. So you can just pick any wizard spell now. It's not limited to the illusion and enchantment like it used to be, or whatever it was.
That's a big deal.
Yeah.
The assassin says iconic features are easier to trigger, greater focus on poisoning and impersonating others. Soul Knife, Psychic Blade.
Just quick on the assassin. I think that's great that they built the poisoning just into the assassin. I have a player who's currently playing an assassin, and he's having fun with it. But you're doing the whole out of combat crafting system to make his poisons, and he's collecting monster parts. This actually just builds it all into the mechanics of the class, being able to poison somebody as an assassin.
This is a very good question. Do you think the weapon properties will be too much to track, or do every time you strike between the players and monsters in 2024? I think it will be hard to. Everybody's going to take some time for everybody to get used to it. And this is going to be one of the, as a dungeon master, I will tell my players, look, you have to learn how this works, and you need to keep track of it, because I'm not gonna be telling you every single time, reminding you to use your weapon property and telling you how it works. Like, this is a player feature. It's a character feature. You need to be able to keep track of it and remember to use it.
And as a DM, there's your incentive to start the game at level 1, right? Start the game at level 1 so players learn those abilities during levels 1 and 2.
Yeah. Back to subclasses. Soul Knife, Psychic Blades of the Vex, Mastery Property, Thief. Activate magic items as a bonus action and remain hidden after attacking. I wish that they had brought over the Baldur's Gate 3 Thief subclass option, because in Baldur's Gate 3, a Thief gets 2 bonus actions, which was so cool. Being able to... Yeah, go ahead.
One thing they're going to do with the Thief that it doesn't say here, but I made notes when I watched the video, is the Thief can stay hidden after attack. So they can attack and not reveal themselves. That's one of the Thief's abilities. So doing that is like having 2 bonus actions, because you now no longer need to use your bonus action to hide.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And then so you'll still be able to use your bonus action for something else while staying hidden. So I think that's their solution to kind of give you that Baldur's Gate flavor.
Yeah, that's generally what I would do playing Astarion. Is I would if I was already hidden, I would attack, bonus action, attack once, move, and then hide again. Pretty much was my default Astarion strat every time I played Baldur's Gate 3. Steady Aim is now a base class feature. Cunning Strike. Trade sneak attack damage die for one of these 3 effects: poison, trip, or withdraw. I'm not sure how I feel about this yet. I feel like this makes sneak attack a lot more complicated. What do you got? What do you think, Brad?
I agree that it makes it more complicated, and is that going to drag play when you're trying to figure out what weapon mastery property to use and whether or not you're going to spend sneak attack dice to do one of these effects? Like, you're getting into like wizard spell slot management at this point for your rogue. But if the player knows what they're doing and they're able to do that well, and manage it at the table so it's not taking forever, the effect is going to be cool for your smart player who's kind of gauging how much damage the monster's already taken. Do I really need to dump this much damage into one target, or should I default to one of these other, poison, trip, or withdraw? So I think it all sounds cool. I like the effect. It's just, is it something that players are going to manage well at the table in a timely fashion is the question.
Yeah.
I also noticed that disarm is not on the list. In the playtest, there was a 4th option called disarm. So they did away with that one. Like the
Battle Master maneuver?
Yeah, it was similar. So you could spend sneak attack dice to disarm the opponent, but they took that off the list.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, it feels like the thing that feels confusing for me is where you trade a damage die, which instead it should be like, if they really wanted to lean into this sneak attack, you would get like sneak attack points at level 5, where you would normally do 3d6 damage, I think. Instead, they say you get 3 sneak attack points. You can spend a point on 1d6 or spend a point on one of these effects. And that would make more sense than saying, well, I do 3d6, but I'm going to minus one of those d6s to poison. Or if it was points, I feel like it would be more clear. Reliable.
I think what players will need to do is kind of think of it like a dice pool game. So basically you're thinking about your sneak attack dice like a point system, like a dice pool. So you have this many dice. Do you want to use them for damage, or do you want to use them for an effect? So it's more like, like I said, like a dice pool game in that respect.
Yeah, that's a good point. Reliable talent goes from level 11 to 7. I feel like this is OP. Reliable talent, I feel like, has always been OP, even at level 11. Because, there's really very little danger of the rogue failing at anything once they have reliable talent. I've never seen a rogue with reliable talent. They're rolling 25s, 30s, 35s on stealth checks, 30 on lockpick checks. It just becomes like, at that point, why have the rogue roll for anything anymore?
Yeah.
Then maybe we'll cap it here at level 11. Use 2 cunning strike options at once, so you could poison and trip, or trip and withdraw at the cost of 2 sneak attack damage dice.
Yeah.
So
and then I made a couple of notes here when I was watching the videos. The things that I thought were interesting: the assassinate ability from the assassin. Because of the way they changed the surprise, it just works on anybody who hasn't made an attack yet. So and so the assassins basically, you're going to be able to use that first combat instead of like having to figure out who they're surprising. The other thing I thought was interesting is the assassin can do steady aim on the move, and they reference that as being like John Wick, how they describe that. And the other thing about the Arcane Trickster is when the Mage Hand, the Arcane Trickster Mage Hand, you can use that to trip an enemy. So in your Mage Hand, you can use that as a trip attack.
Nice.
Yeah.
Is disarm still available under weapon mastery instead of the cunning strike dice swap? I don't know. Do you know the answer to this, Brad?
I believe disarm is still there for you're talking like the fighter battle master stuff. I'm pretty sure disarm is still there for
weapon mastery. Like, is there a disarm? Are any of the masteries disarm?
Trying to remember. I don't think so. Somewhere I had a list of all those.
Yeah, I'm not as well versed on weapon mastery. We can just.
There were fewer of them. There was one they got rid of. I know that. Let's see. That's a good question.
Rogue weapon mastery. No, rogues get Nick and Vex. Nick with the dagger and Vex with the short bow. So that's the answer to that question. You got any more thoughts on the rogue, or are we ready to move on to the Vorlock?
And just looking at the weapon mastery properties in general, I do not see. So there's cleave, graze, nick, push, sap, slow, topple, and vex. So there's not a disarm in those.
Okay.
So even if you were like in rogue or taking the feat to get extra weapon mastery properties, there's still not a disarm. So I think they're maybe just pulling away from the idea of disarm altogether.
Yeah, because it doesn't really do a whole lot for you unless you also use an action to kick a weapon away, or you can magically move the weapon away, because the bad guy can always use a free object interaction to lean down and pick up the sword, right?
Right. Yeah.
It doesn't do you a whole lot. The Warlock now in a separate conversation, I think Brad commented on a YouTube community post I put up. Brad said he had no interest in playing the Warlock because of their over reliance on Eldritch Blast, which I take some umbrage to. I love Warlocks, Maybe we'll get into that as we go along here. Because I played warlocks. I played a lot of warlocks, not a lot, but I have for a significant amount of time. Most recently, I played a warlock from level 9 to or level 8 to 15 in a Dungeon of the Mad Mage campaign until he died. Rest in peace. But yeah, so I played a warlock for a solid year pretty recently. Level 1, you get Eldritch invocations have changed. You can now select one invocation at level 2. At level 1, I mean. I think you used to have to wait to level 2 to get them. The former pact boons are now invocations. You can select one at level 1. You're no longer limited to just one as you level up, so if you wanted to... yeah, ring ding ding, ring the bell. Me and Brad are going to fight it out. So this is interesting. So you can, I was partial to the Pact of the Chain to get the familiar, but you can do that and also be a Pact of the Tome if you wanted to, although Pact of the Tome is kind of worthless. It just basically gives you some extra cantrips. But Pact of the Blade is the other one, right?
Right.
So you could do...
Yeah, because the pacts are now invocations. So you can just, when you select your invocations, you can take a pact. So you can have a warlock without a pact feature, or you can have a warlock with all three pact features. It's just invocations you choose now.
You get more of them, which is dope. Cantrip buffing invocations can be chosen for other cantrips than Eldritch Blast, and I love this.
Yes.
I think Eldritch Blast is a kick-ass spell. To me, it is. I'm fine with it being the warlock's main thing because it's 120 feet. It's force damage, and you get 2 at level 5, 3 at level 11, and 4 at level 17. It scales attacks better than the fighter, because the fighter doesn't get that 4th attack until level 20, which they may be changing that for 5.5. But up until now, it was the only 4 attack thing at level 17 you could have, I think. I may be talking out of my butt with that one. But it's scaled better than the fighter's attacks. And with the invocations that you could tweak it, adding your charisma mod for damage, adding a slow effect once per turn. And mainly, the main one is pushing the enemy back 10 feet with each hit. That was my bread and butter as a warlock, was Eldritch Blasting, pushing an enemy back to keep them, like in Dungeon of the Mad Mage, our DM had a special thing. We fought Xanathar, and we basically came up with a plan where we casted it was some kind of really nasty area of effect thing, where Xanathar was blinded, couldn't cast any spells, and I just kept using that Eldritch Blast push to push him back inside that area of effect thing. He had no chance. That is pushing 10 feet per hit is incredible. So if you can add those to your preferred cantrip, to Cone of Cold, Acid Splash, whatever. I don't know if there's limitations to exactly which cantrips you can use it on, but I feel like this is an awesome thing for the warlock to be able to do.
Yeah, the first thing I thought of was Ray of Frost, because it reduces speed by 10 feet. So if you're pushing them away, reducing their speed by 10, and then you're also stacking that invocation that slows the creature as well, you could really stymie the target with a couple of well-placed Ray of Frosts, upgraded by the warlock abilities, right?
Yeah. I also really like this one, that invocations are not fueled by spell slots, because with a lot of warlock invocations, an invocation would say something like, you can take this invocation to cast Polymorph with a warlock spell slot, which I always thought those invocations were dumb because you get so few spell slots anyway, that I would always take invocations that were not reliant on spell slots, like Trickster's Escape lets you cast Freedom of Movement once per day. That's basically just like a free spell that's not dependent on your very limited warlock spell slots. So this is smart, because using up your limited spell slots anyway was just dumb. Yep. Magical Cunning Wounds for long rest. Go ahead.
We just covered the two things that made me not play a warlock. The fact that you had to use Eldritch Blast to do cool stuff, and the fact that you had so many invocations that use spell slots. Those are the two things that just annoyed me, and that's why I never played one.
Magical Cunning. Once per long rest, complete a 1-minute ritual to restore half your maximum packed magic spell slots. This is good for when you are the warlock in a party with a bunch of long rest characters, and after the combat, you're all out of spell slots, and you're like, "Come on, guys, let's short rest, please. Let's just take an hour." And everyone's like, "No." This at least can get you some of your, up to level, restore half, rounded down. This would mean from levels 1 all the way up to 17, you just get one of them back, because you get 2 spell slots up to level 11 and 3 spell slots from 11 to 16. So getting half of them back would only mean 1 spell slot, right?
Right. I don't understand why they didn't just change the number of spell slots you get as a warlock. Why didn't they just bump the whole list up by 1 spell slot?
That was my recommendation in my UA feedback, was just give the warlock 1 more spell slot. That was like my recommendation for the monk, was just bump up their damage die by 1 and everything will be so much better.
Mm-hmm. Which I think they did that for the monk.
They did, yeah. Along with, they gave the monk a bunch of other stuff too.
Oh yeah, the monk's been totally reworked.
Yeah, we'll probably have to cover that one next week. They haven't put out a video on that yet. Subclasses, level 3 now. Always prepared spell list has tweaks. Archfey Patron, several key features been replaced. Celestial Patron, magical cunning can restore, blah, blah, blah. Fiend Patron, several quality of life. Great Old Patron, brand new features added. Changes to previous features. Does this tell us exactly what they were?
The Archfey and the Great Old One have been completely reworked. They're very different than what they used to be, and much better. The Fey Patron, the Archfey Patron Warlock it's like the king of teleporting now. It just Misty steps all over the place. Very cool. And the Great Old One is much improved as well. The Celestial and the Fiend didn't get as much work, but those were 2 that were already really good. The only reason people didn't love Celestial is because it just came out at the same time as the Hexblade, and the Hexblade stole all the attention.
Mm-hmm.
But the Celestial's always been good. Fiend's always been good. Those 2 largely, I mean, they have changes, but power level, they largely stay the same power level. But Archfey and Great Old One are much improved, and I definitely want to play a Warlock now.
Nice. The one I played, my subclass was the Genie Warlock.
Oh yeah.
Which was cool because it lets you add your proficiency bonus as damage once per attack, or once per turn. Yeah, once per turn. And also you could would grant you a vessel you could go into for double your proficiency bonus hours. So I had a ring, and I could bring the whole party inside the ring as an extra dimensional space, and we would long rest in there. It was always really nice. So we would go inside the ring, then I'd have my familiar take the ring and go hide it somewhere, and then my familiar would just fly away, and so we could always long rest inside this very dangerous dungeon without. It was basically like a tiny hut, but without the worry of the enemies gathering around inside the hut, because we couldn't find this little tiny ring. Anyway, that was dope. Level 9, Contact Patron, a brand new Warlock feature, which this is something that every Warlock was asking their DM to homebrew for them anyway, right?
Right. And that's the fun part about playing the Warlock, is that relationship with your patron.
Yeah.
So this is like a no-brainer that they added this.
Yeah, to give you contact other plane. Let's look at that real quick.
I'm gonna take a quick break. I'll be right back.
Okay.
So I'm just gonna stop my camera and I'll be right back.
Okay. I am gonna keep talking here. I tell you, when I played this Warlock in this campaign, the way I did it was that my character was a former street thug who had stumbled upon a magic lamp. It was a genie lamp, and he picked up the lamp, rubbed the lamp. The genie came out, granted him a couple of wishes, which he wasted. Then he wished for the genie's freedom for his third wish. So the genie became free and said, "Hey kid, how would you like to come work for me?" But this genie, this genie was like this very imposing djinn figure, but basically functioned as my character's probation officer. So my character was, street thug. He was prone to committing lots of crimes, and so his patron would be like, "You keeping your nose clean? You keeping your nose clean? Are you behaving? Not getting in any trouble? Are you?" And that was always kind of a very different. Usually, people think of patrons as being like, "Go out and do evil in my name." Oh no. Huh. All right. So at level 11, the Mystic Arcanum, the previous optional rule from Tasha's Cauldron, everything to change your Mystic Arcanum spells when you gain a Warlock level is now built into the class. Again, this is another thing that I just think that most DMs would just let you do when you level up to change out some of your spells. And that pretty much covers the Warlock. One note I had here about the fact that you get this baby pact at level 1, and then you get the full pact at level 3. I wonder if there's going to be guidance in the player's handbook for how to, or the Dungeon Master's Guide for how to roleplay this. Oh, hey, Brad, you're back.
I'm back.
So that's something I wonder. Go ahead.
I had a thought on that, at least for my own idea of playing a Warlock, because you can take the Pact of the Chain and get the Familiar. I would play a character where they start off with like a celestial kind of theme in their pact, right? So their invocations they take at first level, they get that new little Sphinx cat you can get. So like you start off as kind of a good guy, and then when you get to third level, you go Fiend Pact and start shifting. It's like, and then you have this celestial familiar who's constantly telling you to not do the things you're doing. You can kind of role play the tension between choosing between celestial and fiendish abilities.
That sounds fun. All right, moving on to the Druid. Now, they didn't really tell us everything about the Druid. The most mischievous thing I did under my djinn's patronage. Brad, I told a little story about my Warlock while you were gone. The most mischievous thing, I'll do this real quick. We were in the city of Skullport, and we had to go talk to these frog people, but to progress the story, but none of us spoke their language. So my Warlock went around Skullport going, "Hey, anybody here speak frog? You speak frog? Hey, meet somebody who speaks frog." This guy came forward and sold me a potion that he said would allow me to speak frog. I knew he was probably full of crap, but I rolled really bad on my insight, so I went ahead and bought the potion. Yes, it was poison, so I went back and I made him drink all of his stock of that potion, and he went crazy. And then I went and told my patron about it the next day. My character felt very bad for having driven this potion seller to insanity, and my patron forgave me. He said, shit happens. You were mad. So he let me off the hook. Anyway, back to Druids. So yeah, they really only told us about Wild Shape, which is the thing most people were curious about anyway. But the thing is, go ahead.
In the article, they only tell us about Wild Shape, but the video they did get into a little bit more, interesting things about the Druid. So,
okay, you're gonna have to tell us about that. I don't think I watched this video, but there was one thing that they still didn't. I don't think they said which, if any, of the Wild Shape UA alternatives they're actually using. Like, they had the one option with the templates, where you get a land, sea, and air template, and you get one option where you get a certain number of prepared wild shapes. you prepare them like spells. They didn't actually say or no changes at all to 2014. Did they actually say at any point during the video which one of those they're doing?
Yeah, so they're using stat blocks again. So you're still going to choose stat blocks.
Okay.
The difference is you now get temporary hit points when you wild shape. And the thing is, dropping to 0 doesn't knock you out of wild shape. You just continue to use your own hit points once you run out of temporary hit points. So like you could wild shape into a lion, right? And you would have the lion's attacks and the lion's abilities from the stat block, but you're using your temporary hit points. From the way I understand it, is even after those temporary hit points run out, you still have access to those lion's abilities until your wild shape runs out. It's just you're now using your own hit points when the lion gets hit. If that makes sense.
So it doesn't sound like they've done anything to make the druid a more beginner friendly class.
Not
it
really.
Still seems like it's one of the most complex classes, rivaled only maybe by the wizard and the artificer, because it's still a very high bookkeeping class, because you're going to have access to all those stat blocks. You're going to have cards or a monster manual. Although I did, I don't know if where they said it, but they said that they were going to be putting some of the stat blocks for druid in the player's handbook, right?
Right. So they said there's enough stat blocks in the player's handbook that as long as you're not playing Circle of the Moon, you'll have plenty of options to choose from. And so the only druid that will really need the monster manual will be the Circle of the Moon, and they won't need the monster manual until they're higher level, is what they said.
Gotcha.
So they at least did that. So there's going to be a decent amount of beast stat blocks in the monster manual. In the player's handbook, which is good because we're not getting the monster manual till next year. So at least we've got some monsters we can run.
Yeah.
So that's the best they did to make it more user friendly for new players. Is the beast stat blocks are in the player's handbook.
Yeah. So wild shape differences. It's a bonus action instead of an action. So you can start your turn, cast your cool druid spell that you're going to be concentrating on, entangle or silence or cure wounds or whatever, and then you can still turn into a bear or a badger or whatever with your bonus action. So you can still do 2 really cool things on your turn. I've noticed that across all the classes. They've done a lot more stuff like improving action economy in general, where a lot of things that would used to cost a bonus action, you can now do as part of an action, or a lot of things that were an action have been shifted to bonus action. Because I think they're still, because it's my opinion that DC 20 and Pathfinder have them beat on action economy, with their just 3 or 4 action point system. So I feel like they're trying to compete directly with that.
Yeah. And one thing I found interesting, I forget which video it was, but Todd Kendrick asked, does that speed up the game? And Jeremy Crawford was very honest with his answer, no. I guess Todd was thinking, if I can do all these things that used to take an action, I can now do them as a bonus action, so I'm getting them out of the way. I'm not waiting for my next turn to do something. So Todd must be thinking, well, maybe this will speed the game up. And Jeremy's like, no.
Todd thought he was lobbing a softball for Jeremy Crawford to hit out of the park. And Jeremy was like, well, that's pretty funny.
Jeremy's lawful good. I don't think he can lie.
Perkins, however, maybe not so much. I don't know. Perkins is a little shifty in the eyes.
Yeah, he's chaotic something.
You get more wild shape uses, 2 at level 2, 3 at level 6, 4 at level 17. You regain 1 when you short rest. Like this is evidence for what we were talking about earlier, that more classes are getting short rest abilities, those encounter powers. Regain all uses when you finish long rest. Level 5, you can use a wild resurgence to restore use. So you get sort of that the equivalent of the sorcerer's spell points to spell slots to sorcery points to spell slots. And I think I actually did watch this druid video because I remember him trying to explain it can go one way but not the other, and that part being kind of confusing, where he was like, you can do this once a day one way, the other way you can do it as many times as you want. And I was like, that's kind of messy.
You can use any number of spell slots to make wild shapes. So you can wild shape all day long if you want to. Just use up all your spell slots as wild shapes. You can only once can you take a wild shape and turn it into a spell slot. And the reason for that was to prevent the like coffee lock thing, right? Where you can like, the thing that you would do with the warlock and sorcerer, where you convert all your points, convert spells into sorcery points, take a short rest, get your spells back, and then convert sorcery points back into spell slots. So that's why they did it that way. It was to prevent that problem.
Yeah. Just like we were talking about earlier with the bag of rats problem, it seems like they're trying to close some of those technical loopholes, which this is something that hadn't even occurred to me until you said coffee lock just now. I wonder if they have fixed the coffee lock. I'm going to need to dig into that.
Right. Well, we might have to wait and see the sorcerer, how that works. I'm sure that's something they addressed. If they were thinking we can't go both ways with wild shape to spell slot, they must have been thinking about that for the warlock.
Yeah, I wonder. Because I don't, thinking about it now, I don't think they've done anything from the warlock side that would have changed how that works, but we haven't gotten the sorcerer yet in these videos. So I wonder if they're going to be addressing that.
Yeah.
Interesting. TBD, I suppose. Hit points, wild shape. You already mentioned this. You get temporary hit points. I have only played a druid in a one shot. I think as a dungeon master, I feel like I've seen lots of other people play druids, and I feel like, the way getting to spend their wild shapes hit points seemed OP. So I think this is probably for the best, although probably a lot of players aren't going to like this, being able to wild shape to get a bunch of free hit points. Beast form limitations, blah, blah, blah. This is largely... 4 known forms. They do say. 8, so you can prepare.
Right. So you'll pick your stat blocks. Which stat blocks you're going to use. Kind of like a wizard would pick your spells.
Yeah, okay. Interesting. So this is what I wasn't sure if they had clarified before. We're learning this live. So you get at level 2, you get 4. Basically, you're preparing forms like you would prepare spells. Okay. This is a lot more simple then. I mean, not a lot more simple, but it's more simple than just having access to the whole, 30-something beast creatures that exist out there among all that. Okay, that's interesting. I hadn't realized that, but it says it in black and white right here.
Yeah, so you'll have access to all the beast creatures in the player's handbook, but that decision will be made like when you take your long rest because you're picking your 4 forms. So the bulk of the time spent will be spent at a point in the game where you're not having to make a crucial decision.
So this is interesting. Sense. So they're changing, essentially removing a flavor thing from 2014 where it would be a creature you've seen before. So what happens now in the game where you have 4 forms prepared at level 2 and then you see a squirrel go by, the DM narrates, a deer trotting through the forest, and the druid goes, "Ooh, can I transform into a deer now?" Huh. I guess you wouldn't be able to do that anymore unless you remove one of your... This is when you finish a long rest, you may replace one known form with another. You would have to remove one of yours to be able to add deer to your list of forms now.
Right. So you see a deer or see some animal you've never seen before, then when your next long rest, you could pick that to add to your 4 forms, but you'd be dropping another form. But then the next day you can get it back. So it's just
Yeah. And you can speak, which is nice. I've been in that situation playing with a druid where they're a bear or they're a giant crab, and they're really like, I don't know, I can't chime in, guys. I'm a crab. We're like, damn it. Damage and wild shape. Select the option of primal strike, gaining additional. So this is nice if you aren't playing. Which is the one that gets the land, circle of moon or land? Which one is it that gives you all the additional, more powerful monsters? Is it
the circle of the moon?
Moon. Yeah. So if you're not playing Circle of the Moon and you're stuck with Black Bear, and as your best option until higher levels, you can at least get additional damage. You can add fire or cold, or lightning or thunder when you do that claw attack. And then that damage increases to 2d8 at level 15. Those are nice. And then Wild Companion. There's another optional rule that's just become that they're just... here's what I think they're going to do. I think in probably 2026, they are going to take all of the rules from Tasha's and Xanathar's that they did not fold into the 2024 book, put them in a new book, and then deprecate Xanathar's and Tasha's. They'll be considered legacy. It'll be something like, Mordenkainen's Grimoire of Knowledge, and then they'll officially deprecate Tasha's and Xanathar's because all of the good stuff will be in either the default PHB or this new core book that's coming out.
Melf's Mysteries of Everything.
There you go. I like that. Yeah, because they're taking all the good stuff and just making it core anyway, so there's very little point into having those books around as non-legacy content anyway.
Right. Brightside Gaming had a comment. I feel like long time tables will just stick to the old rules about forms and shape. So yeah, I think that's something that people homebrew anyway. How they handle druids with wild shape. I think that'll just continue. I think he's right there.
Yeah, I agree, and I think we're gonna have to see how this plays out when the table comes together in spring of 2025, and somebody says, I want to play a new fighter because they're dope, and somebody says, I want to play an old druid because they're way better, and then we'll just have to see how that plays out at the table when you've got this mishmash of old style characters and new style characters, and then a dungeon master who's going, I don't know which friggin' stat blocks to use because this fighter is now way OP compared to this old druid, or this old paladin is still more powerful than this new warlock. I think it's going to be a mess, and it's probably going to take some adjustment time for the community to figure out, like, here's how you run. There's going to be a lot of YouTube videos about how to run D&D for mixed tables, or whatever they're going to be calling it now.
Yeah.
So
I think the paladin. Yeah, I think the paladin is going to be the one that, like, people are going to want to try to fix the smite to make it more like the old version. So I think you'll just see some homebrew rules about smiting to kind of placate those players that are mad about the nerf.
Yeah. Yeah.
But go ahead.
As someone who's currently playing a paladin in a campaign, I have mixed feelings about what they're doing with it. I understand once per turn, that would be fine with me, but making it a bonus action, I feel like is a bridge too far. That's too much. Give us paladins our bonus actions back.
So some final thoughts on the article here. Just goes over wild shape, but I made some notes from the video. And so first of all, one of the things that I really liked about the class of the druid is that you now have two choices, one at first level and then one at a higher level, where you choose between a martial ability and a spell casting ability. So you a strength based melee druid if you want to. Do primal order that you at first level you choose either the warden, which gives you proficiency in martial weapons, or you choose magician, which gives you cantrips and the ability to combine wisdom and intelligence on your nature and arcana checks. So you kind of pick a theme. Do you want to be a nature wizard, or you want to be a nature warrior kind of base when you choose your druid? And so that, I think, gives you more options to build a battle druid if you want to. I thought that was really cool. Melee druid that that doesn't necessarily rely on wild shape. And then the other thing, the biggest thing, going back to making things easier for new players, is every subclass other than the moon druid has a way to use wild shape for something other than wild shape. So you can play a druid and never wild shape, but you're not wasting any resources because you'll be able to use that wild shape ability to do other things. So I thought that was pretty cool. The Circle of the Sea can use their wild shape to summon water. So they basically just summon water around them and can make attacks with the water. So I thought that was a cool use of wild shape. So you'll definitely be able to play a more caster-like druid and not worry about wild shape. I thought that was cool too. So definitely more options when customizing your druid overall, and I thought that was really good.
Yeah, I've played alongside some druids who almost never use their wild shape. Who mostly reserve their wild shape for if they get low on HP and they need a big bag of hit points, which they won't be able to do anymore, but those people can still use their wild shapes for other things, which is good. Moving on to the go ahead.
Oh, one last thought. The Circle of the Land, kind of like the Archfey Warlock and the Great Old One Warlock, the Circle of the Land has been completely reworked. It's much better overall. So that I was happy with. So because the Circle of the Land was definitely the least powerful subclass because everybody chose Moon, and then when Xanathar's and Tasha's druids came out, everybody chose those. So Circle of the Land definitely gets a big glow up, which was cool.
Let's talk about wizards. Brad, have you played a lot of wizards in 5e? You said you're a forever DM. You don't get to play much.
When I do play, I usually play wizard or sorcerer. Yeah, those are my favorite classes. Yeah.
I've never gotten to play a wizard from level 1. I have played a few wizards, but it's always been at higher levels, and it's always been overwhelmed. I've always come in and played a level 12 wizard for a one-shot, or I played a level 14 wizard for a mini arc, like a 4-session campaign, and I've always just been overwhelmed because they get so many things they can do. I've never gotten to actually start at level 1 or level 3 and work my way up and get used to the wizard powers. So I've never had fun playing wizard because I've never gotten that gradual progression. Anyway,
real quick before we dive into the wizard, I wanted to point out Brightside Gaming said that he mains Paladin, and the changes to Smite are good. So I know him personally, and he plays a lot of Paladins. The only time he's not playing a Paladin, he's usually playing a Ranger. So
Paladin, Ranger.
If he says it's good,
we will.
If he says it's good, I believe him.
Trust him. Yeah, I've been playing a Paladin for about 6 months, and I'm thinking about switching because the DPS is fun, but I'm just kind of getting tired of just hit smite. Every time I see their default wizard here, I just think of Bria Iyengar. It looks quite a bit like a Bria. Anyway, The wizard, number of prepared spells is now a fixed number. Can replace one cantrip each long rest. That's pretty dope. You're going down into the dungeon, so you can swap out mending for light or, whatever. Spellbooks can be used as spellcasting foci. Backing up your spellbook is faster and cheaper. Maybe you can explain this one as someone who's hasn't played a lot of wizards. And ritual casting has been removed from spellcasting. Classes can now cast any prepared spells with ritual tag as a ritual. Does this mean all classes? Does this mean all classes are ritual casters now? Brad, please help explain this to me.
I'm reading it. I'm trying to think. 'Cause I remember them mentioning this in the video. The ritual casting has been removed from spell casting. Okay, so they took away the ritual casting ability that was in the wizard's class, and I think that or some version of it is now just a general rule for all ritual casting. So there's not a specific rule for wizards to cast ritual spells. Just everybody who's a caster can cast ritual spells now.
Interesting. So if your class has access to a spell with a ritual tag, you can ritual cast it. Huh.
Yeah, that's one of the things I'm interested in seeing is how much they've changed just the spells in general. They've not dramatically, but they've changed a lot of spells in the game, but we haven't seen them all. So I'm curious. And the way they've made changes to spells is going to impact how the wizard plays. So I don't think we get a lot of like dramatic changes to the wizard class because it was already one of the best classes. But how the wizard plays is largely going to change because of the way they've changed the spells.
Spellbooks receive a bit of love with more defined properties. The ability to use the spellcasting function are now impossible to read by anyone but you without the use of identify.
So people can't steal your spellbook and steal your spells.
Huh. So if you find someone else's spellbook, do you have to use identify to be able to copy their spells from their book into your spellbook?
That seems to be what they're saying.
Huh. Interesting. I wonder if you have to cast identify once or if you have to cast identify per spell.
That'll be interesting.
Huh. That might be the case where you have to either spend hours ritual casting identify if it is still a ritual spell, which we don't know, or you have to burn up a whole bunch of spell slots to be able to transfer, to be able to identify and then copy a spell from someone else's spellbook into yours. Do you understand what this means about backing up your spellbook is faster and cheaper?
Yeah, because there was a rule for wizards that if you lost your spellbook, there was a way to recreate it. And I think all they did was just reduce the amount of time and the amount of gold it takes to recreate your spellbook.
Okay. Go ahead.
I think they were just getting rid of that annoying pain point that some jerk DMs would steal the wizard's spellbook to mess with them.
That is a jerk move. Ritual Adept functions the same as ritual casting, but these rules are now housed under their own feature. Scholar, gain expertise in a select skill. That's good. It's good to have somebody in the party with an actual decent arcana skill or history or religion, because I don't know about you, but in 90% of the groups that I've played in or DM'd for, 90% of the PCs dump int, except for the wizard. So nobody's good in arcana, history, religion, nature. Nobody can ever pass those checks. So
yeah, the other thing about the scholar ability is it does away with the rather lame ability that used to be here at level 2. I think it had the same name, but it just allowed you to copy spells that you were specialized in. So if you were a conjurer, when you got this ability at second level, conjuration spells would be cheaper to put into your spell book. If you were illusionist, illusion spells would be cheaper to put into your spell book. They did away with that because it was kind of a lame ability that nobody used. I had a player play a wizard up until level 20 in one campaign, and then after the campaign, he said, "What is that ability all about anyway?" Like he never used it the entire game. So they replaced that now with this expertise in these intelligence skills.
If you don't use an ability for, I assume it probably took you 2 to 3 years to run a campaign up to level 20. If you never use an ability once, it's not an integral part of the class. Wizard subclass, level 3, blah, blah, blah. We're going to do 2 free spells from the school. Another free spell each time they gain access to a new level of spell slot. That's good. Less reliance on finding spell books, less reliance on learning spells out there in the world, because not every DM is going to provide ways for the wizard to learn spells in the world. And the party's going to get annoyed if the wizard always wants to go visit the library in every town they visit, or the mage's cloister to try to learn spells. After Arcane Ward can now be refilled directly using spell slots. You get Counterspell and Dispel Magic as always prepared spells. Diviner, the third eye, gives 120-foot dark vision, see invisibility. Evoker, Potent Cantrip, and Sculpt spells have swapped places. Potent Cantrip now applies to missed spell attacks. I do like that. So even if you miss, you get to do some damage, sort of like the not Nick. Is it Graze, the weapon mastery one that does that?
Yep. The other thing about switching these, the Potent Cantrip and Sculpt spells, is it makes more sense to get Potent Cantrip early when you're lower level and you're using your cantrips far more often, and it makes sense to get Sculpt spells later when when you have more spell slots to use. So that's just a quality of life switch, I think. Some people online, when this first came out in the UA, were calling it a nerf. I see it as like you're going to use both of these abilities more often this way, in my opinion.
Yeah, that makes sense. The illusionist, you can ignore verbal components for illusion spells and can cast minor illusion as a bonus action. I like this a lot. It's sort of a free sorcerer subtle spell for illusion spells. That's pretty nice. Minor illusion as a bonus action. You can do it with your action and your bonus action to create 2 minor illusions, maybe. I don't know if that's how the spell works. Let's see. If you cast another one, does it go away?
I think it's... is it concentration?
The illusion ends if you dismiss it as an action or cast the spell again. Yeah. So no double illusioning.
No, but you can cast it as a bonus action to provide a distraction and then use your action to, attack or do something else.
There you go. Memorize spell. Swap one prepared spell for one in your spellbook each short rest. That's very useful. When you come up on the door that's super locked that the rogue can't open, you say, okay, guys, let's just sit here in front of this door for an hour. I will prepare knock, swap out, silence for knock, and then we can get this door open. That's pretty handy. Then nothing again to level 18. Any other thoughts on the wizard?
As far as the subclasses go, as far as just the balance of the subclasses, I think they added enough to Evoker to make it look or feel better, but it's not overpowered. Same with Diviner. I think those two are probably the best wizard subclasses out of the Player's Handbook classes. So I think they're kind of still hanging around the same weight class as far as how much damage they can put out and how effective they are. And then Abjurer and Illusionist got a little bit of an upgrade. And so I think they're all going to be solid subclasses, which I think is the theme with all of these, is they really paid attention to that balance between subclasses, because that was a pain point for a lot of players. And the other thing that they mentioned in the Wizard video is there's a, what did they call it? It's not an appendix, but like a glossary. A glossary that focuses on the spells themselves to help you, be able to figure out which spells do what at a glance, kind of thing. So the spell glossary is supposed to be a helpful tool for your casting classes. I thought that was a really good idea.
Nice. So I'm thinking we've been going for 90 minutes now. Maybe we call it here, and then we can talk about the ranger and probably the monk, sorcerer. What else? I don't remember what monk, sorcerer, and
cleric. Those are the three we haven't seen yet. Yeah. The ranger just came out today, so give us some time to kind of get our thoughts together on it. I haven't actually seen the video yet. It just came out I think the video just came out like an hour or two ago.
Yeah, I haven't seen it either. But yeah, it seems mostly unchanged from the UA, but a lot of people don't pay attention to the UA. It's only nerds like me and Brad that pay attention to the UA. All right, so we're going to call it there. Brad, thanks for joining me on this casual Friday. And I got to go get ready to pick up my kid from camp. And thanks to you for you right there. You. I'm talking to you, person watching. Thanks for joining us on this little journey to get this big preview of the 2024 1D&D 5.5, 5e, 2e, 5e revised. That's what I'm calling it, and use that text string every time. You got any final words? For us, Brad?
Overall, I'm excited about the new edition. I always like new editions because it brings in new players and new ideas, and it's fun.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us, and we hope you have a great weekend. And next week is Kraken Week.
Kraken Week.
Keep an eye out for that. Brad and I are both doing videos on Kraken Week. We've got some surprises coming for you, so pay attention, and we'll see you soon. Bye, guys.